Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the third chapter in John's first epistle. We covered the first 10 verses. The first three verses speak of our adoption, the mysteries of the resurrection, and the hope of the second coming in that order. But what's really most relevant to the passage we're going to cover, and also to the John itself, is he speaks of sin, and sin has become a forbidden vocabulary term in a lot of places, even in society and even in the church itself, and the consequences for ignoring or underestimating or just trying to sweep away this ever-present danger and devastating reality are fatal. Everyone doing sin also does lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. Before the law, the Mosaic law, there was sin. Sin reigned from Adam to Moses, as Paul makes plain in the 5th chapter of Romans. But what the law does is it provides a standard and a guide and a barometer for which we know that we sin. So to sin means missing the mark of God's intended standards and our given response to certain situations. But we don't, even the one without the law, they have a conscience which convicts them when they're doing law. And he's going to speak about the heart towards the tail end of the range we're going to cover today. And you know that he was manifested to take away our sins, and in him there is no sin. Thankfully, there is a solution to sin, and that solution came in the form of a person whose entire reason to coming for this earth and pitching his tent among men was to take away their sins. And he was able to do this because he was sinless. He was born without sin. He lived without sin. He died without sin. He became sin. He bore the penalty of sin, even though he was sinless. And this makes him the atonement, the capital A one, who is able to provide or procure a forgiveness that is of longer lasting value and rendering henceforth all animal sacrifices obsolete. Everyone staying in him does not sin. Everyone sinning has neither seen him nor known him. The concept of abiding in union, the doctrine of union, and the concept of abiding are unique to John. And he speaks about this in his gospel and also in his epistle. And the idea is that he abides in us and we abide in him in the vine, inasmuch as the vine gives nutrients and sustenance to all the branches. We are the branches, and outside and apart from the vine, we have no life in us. So we have to stay connected to him, and the trick is not him having more of us, but us having more of him. And if we are sinning, that means that he is absent, he is not on our minds, and it is impossible to think about God every minute of the waking day. That's just not a realistic expectation. But the danger is when he is not on your mind, then you are more prone and more vulnerable, and you have your guard down. So think about the antidote to sin rather than be distracted by the sin itself. And he tells them, don't be deceived. If you are righteous, you are doing righteousness. Verse 8, the one doing sin is of the devil, because the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of Man was manifested, to destroy the works of the devil. The devil is the author and the father of sin. He is the original sinner. Before Adam and Eve succumbed to their sin, they had to be tempted by the original sinner. This is the devil, the angel who abused his agency to rebel. He was the most supremely magnificent one, outstanding among the angels in his wisdom and beauty, until he succumbed to the sin of pride and launched his rebellion. And that he was the sinner from the beginning. He's the original sinner. But the good news is that the Son of Man came to undo the designs and the works in the kingdom of darkness and the designs and works of the devil. He destroys them. He obliterates them. They are of no effect and no harm to those who abide in him. But if we are doing sin, if we are practicing sin and in prolonged practices of doing certain sins, the same ones, then we are serving the kingdom of darkness. And it's everyone having But then verse 10, in this the children of Elohim and the children of the devil are manifest. Everyone not doing righteousness is not of Elohim, neither the one not loving his brother. It may seem a little black and white, but the fact that it is black and white does not diminish the simplicity of its suggestion, does not diminish its veracity. So that it is this dichotomy in this world. There is good and evil, there is light and dark, there are lies and truth, and there are children of Elohim and children of the devil. And by their fruits in our works do we know who we are. So we can recognize one in ourselves. It really takes one to know one, but seeing the children of the devil for who they are is not. We don't want to approach the world as religious detectives and just assume that everyone is of the devil, but the sobering realistic fact is that the majority of the human race is evil and the world is evil. But thankfully there are some doing righteousness, and the way that the mark and measure is how we love our brother. And he delves into this by the analogy of Cain and Abel, the original brothers. Now, the brotherly love that John calls us is to treat the church members as if they were your own brothers. These are spiritual siblings. But the brother, Cain and Abel, were literal brothers, and he literally killed his brother. So he is the antithesis. We're not quite there yet. 11th verse, lesson itself. Because this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. What is the beginning? It is perhaps the beginning of their faith. Love is the introductory message, it's the hook, line, and sink of the Christian walk. It all begins in love. But the other one, now the question of who is the beginning is also answered in the he speaks in the first verse, what was from the beginning, that is a who, that is a being who is incarnate and eternal and pre-existent, a concept unique to John amongst the gospel authors. So he is love, and he commands us to love, and we are to love one another as he loved us. He loved us to all the way, and he loved us even when we were enemies, aliens, and strangers from him. Not as Cain, who was of the wicked one, and killed his brother. And why did he kill him? Because his works were wicked, but those of his brothers were righteous. Cain was the elder brother of Abel. He was born before Abel, and Cain was a tiller of the soil, and Cain was a farmer, and they were called and summoned to offer a sacrifice before Yahweh. Cain, being a tiller of the soil, gave vegetables. This is, the best he had, but his best was not good enough. It was his brother Cain, who was the shepherd, who offered him a sheep. Blood was much more satisfactory and sacrificial. So Yahweh expresses his approval of Abel, and he rejects Cain's sacrifice. This gets Cain mad. It prompts an envy and a jealousy, which eventually develops into the consuming lust for murder. But the important thing is that Cain was not an atheist. He offered worship. He went through the motions. So the children of Cain are often in the house of God. Cain, just Adam was not this horrible, horrible human being. I think a lot of the denominations in Christianity have a depiction of him that is unfortunately degraded. His only sin was that he loved his wife more than the God who gave her to him. So there's something almost noble in that, because he had the command. He knew that he would die that day, yet his wife did not have the command, and he saw that she was determined to eat it, and he would rather die with her than live forever without her. There's something almost noble in his sin, but through that slight mustard seed act of disobedience, the sin nature was set in, and it had devastating effects almost immediately in the form of Cain and Abel. Adam and Eve, who had disobeyed, had to watch their son, their innocent, righteous son, be slain in the open field. And when Cain drew him in, Abel had no expectation. This action of murder was something unprecedented in the animal kingdom. Now, animals can kill, but they cannot murder. Murder is something only humans can do. That is a maliciously motivated, non-necessary. So we were not cannibals, so there's really no need to kill each other prematurely. So the author and controller of life and death remains in the hands of God, and we usurp his prerogative when we interfere and intervene, when we take life prematurely, deliberately, and premeditatively. And the entire reason, now from his envy drew the anger, which prompted the murder, but the whole reason was that he was wicked, so he didn't give his best. I guess, earlier I said he gave his best, but his best was not good enough, and this is inconsistent with the axiom that God rewards the effort, not the outcome. So I just want to amend that. Do not marvel, my brothers, if the world hates you. The world is not a friendly place. It is a corrupt, perverted, fallen world, and it hates us, even though we are trying to save it from its clutches. They hate us because they are wrapped in wickedness, and they envy the fact that we are committed to the life of righteousness. There's something about the sin nature that resists and repels and detests those who are committed to not succumbing to the same traps and deceptions. So the world's going to hate us. The world is one of our enemies, one of the three. The three are the world, the flesh, and the devil, the final of which is constantly trying to manipulate, the middle of which to conform to the first in the world. So the devil is in the world. He is the god of the world. He rules the world. He rules the world of sinners, and he has his friends and people in power in high places. And he is the author of hatred, so the world's hatred does emanate from him. We know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brothers. The one not loving his brother stays in death. So is eternal life seriously that simple, that we have to love each other while we have what time we have on this pale blue dot? And John answers in the affirmative. Without love, that means we have no faith, no saving faith. And that is what makes the miraculous transition of death into life. Death awaits us all. Death is an inescapable reality of life. Where there is life, there is always death. And but death is not the end of human. Death is not extinction. Death is not annihilation. There is life after death. And even though death is a democracy in the sense that it comes to us all equal, and it makes us all equal when it comes. Salvation is an aristocracy. Only a remnant shall be saved. The way to salvation is straight and narrow, and the way to destruction is broad and wide. So we want to be selective about what path we follow if we are determined to enter into life eternal after death. And if we love, then no harm or wrong can come from us loving, either here and now or in the afterlife. Everyone hating his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has everlasting life staying in him. This is actually consistent with the Savior's teaching in the Sermon of the Mount, the 5th chapter, where he elevates the law of Moses. A lot of people accused him of being an alien, an enemy, an opponent of the law, but he actually he did not lessen its demands, but in fact increased it. He made attitudes the equivalent of action. And hatred, murder stems from hatred. And if you harbor hatred in your heart or call your brother Raka, which was a term of derision in the Aramaic, roughly translating as idiot or fool, then you are guilty of murder in spirit, if not in fact. So if you harbor hatred in your heart, then you are, maybe not a murderer, but you are one step away. And all murder is rooted in hatred, unless it, maybe there's vengeance. Yeah, vengeance is hatred. So if you take vengeance into yourself to avenge a life, then you are overstepping the parameters of your boundaries in his sovereign jurisdiction. Life and death still belongs to him, even if someone kills a loved one. That does not give you license or pretext or justification to avenge that death. And if you are a murderer, now is this sin so horrible, murder, that there is no forgiveness? You forfeit your eternal life after you kill someone. And, several prisoners who I've personally interacted with, who are in life for prison for murdering people, have given their hearts to God. And I am convinced that they are saved, they are sincere, they are on fire on ways that is largely, there's so much lukewarmness in the world out here. But, just the fire, I know murderers who I'm convinced are saved. Let's leave it at that. But you don't want to encourage or accept murder no two murders are exact, and there's human elements in it all, and every murderer has a life story, but murder is still not okay. I'm not endorsing murder. I'm just saying it is not automatically an exclusionary barrier to the kingdom of heaven and the life beyond. But as a general principle, if you forfeit a life, but according to the standards of lex talionis, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, you had forfeited your own life. I'm not a death penalty extremist in that sense. But this we have known love, because he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down life for the brothers. The supreme proof and demonstration and act of love was demonstrated on the cross at Calvary when he gave his life for. Now we are to lay down he laid down his life for us, but not only us, but the whole world, past, present, future, all the people in all the countries and all the ages. But he's talking about laying down a life for a brother, and greater love hath no man than this, John says in John 15:13, that he should lay down his life for his brother. But who did he lay down his life for? Romans 5 answers that question. The wicked, the sinners, and his enemies. So that is love beyond description. That is love beyond our capacity to duplicate. We are nevertheless called to love our enemies, but we should also love our friends to the point of self-sacrifice. This is not an embracement for artificial martyrdom, but if necessary, any husband who would not lay down his life for his wife is unworthy of that wife. So this is a proof of love, the willingness to not only self-sacrifice, daily dying, but to give your life itself in a very literal way to protect the life of another. But whoever has this world's good and sees his brothers in needs and shuts up his tender affections from him, how does the love of Elohim stay in him? So if you are rich and you are not concerned, you are indifferent to the plight of those who are not, then that speaks poorly on your ability and capacity and deservingness of love. So if you do, Job was an example of one who had the world's goods, and he always gave a hand and a helping hand to those who were in need, those who were in trouble, those who could not help themselves. Then when Job's experience underwent a revolutionary reversal of fortunes and he was reduced to a needy one, there was none to help him. So if the expectation, if you are in need, is that the world will not give you goods, but Christians do exist to intervene and interrupt that cycle. My little children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. It's not enough to say we love someone, although it does help, but we prove the love and we demonstrate the love in actions and in deeds and things we do for them out in the real world. But it does help to, it's not enough to say that you love someone. You have to prove it, you have to live it, you have to show it, and the way that you show it is in expressible actions that other people can observe and take note and interpret as an expression of love. And the causational effect of being loved is to the ability and capacity to love others. So we have to go above and beyond lip service love. There's no such thing as it's no substitute or adequate alternative or replacement for the authentic article, which is proven by works. Without works, faith is dead. James 2:14-26. And by this we know that we are of the truth, and shall put our hearts at rest before him. Now the heart ordinarily or normally is not an accurate barometer of truth, because in Jeremiah's diagnosis in 17:9 book, which bears his name, it is three things. It is deceitful, ergo it is prone to deception and manipulation. What it perceives as true is often not true. It is desperately wicked, and it is incomprehensible. Who can know it? Who can understand it? So the heart is, it's these three things, and as such, we don't want to be in the process of thinking with our hearts. And the truth can be felt in the heart, but it is ultimately known and assessed and understood in the head. So But if the truth is clicking and connecting in our mind, then there will be peace and security and serenity in our hearts. So that is the effect of which he speaks more directly to in the 19th verse. That if our heart condemns us, Yahweh is greater than our heart and knows all. Now the heart, if he is living in our heart, then we will be grieved and pained and anguish at sin. So it is good that we feel guilt. Guilt is what pain is to the physical body. Guilt is to the spiritual psyche, the conscience. Pain exists to prevent us from doing things that are damaging to ourselves or others, and sin does the same thing with ourselves. So it's good that our heart does convict us, and the Spirit is the convictor, John 16:8. But, greater than our heart, greater than anything, certainly in the universe, is Yahweh, whose supremacy and greatness and grandeur and majesty is unduplicatable. And he is omniscient. He knows all. He knows our hearts. He knows what's best for us. He knows what his will is for us. And we have to know what his will is for us and obey it, and not aspire for omniscience. We cannot know everything, nor was it meant for us to understand all that there is to know. Beloved ones, if your heart does not condemn us, we have boldness towards Yahweh. The blessing of a clean conscience, a heart that does not convict one of sin, is that they can approach with boldness towards the heavenly throne room. And boldness is distinct from presumption. So a lot of people who claim to be saved, they are lip service saved. They say the right things, but they do not do the things that constitute saved lives. They have presumption. They think that once they came to the cross on their knees as they were once, they were saved permanently and eternally so. And that gives them license and presumption to presume on God's grace for their sins that they persist in, hence nullifying the claim that they had ever been born again. And whatever we ask, we receive from him, because we keep his commandments and do what is pleasing with his sight. This ought not, it would be irresponsible to interpret this as a blank check, just an open slate and a blank check for our every whim, want, desire, or deranged or otherwise of our hearts. We are not entitled to all the money, all the cars, all the women, all the wine in the world. We cannot ask these things because this is not what is pleasing in his sight for us. What is pleasing in his sight is something that is different than what we consider pleasing. And do we want to be self-pleasers or man-pleasers or please him? He's the one whose approval we have to cultivate for the judgment which awaits us. And keeping his commandments, obedience is the supreme expression of love, as identified in John 14:15, 21, and 15:14, and also in this epistle elsewhere. And this is his commandment, that we should believe in the name of his Son, Yahshua Messiah, and love one another as he gave us a command. 2 commandments, these are, we have to believe in the name of his Son, and this is parallel to the 2 great commandments, which is love Yahweh with all thy heart, all thy might, all thy faculties, and all their capacities. In the New Testament, the love and the treatment of his Son is the mark and measure of how we treat the Father. So if we believe in the name and the claim and the divinity of his Son, that he was heavenly sent, he originated from heaven, he was in the beginning, before the beginning, and everything else. And the other thing is we have to love one another. No, it's not love thy neighbor, it's just love one another. And neighbor is too restrictive, I feel, for love the fellow man. And one of the reasons is, I've explained this in this book, the Jews were in the practice of defining, of excluding as many people as possible from the demands of neighborly love. So it would have been unthinkable for a Samaritan to step in and save the picture. And the one keeping his commandments stays in him, and he in him. And by this we know that he stays in us, by the Spirit which he gave us. So keeping his commandments, that is how we abide in him. That is how we stay connected to our life source, the vine, without which the branches would wither and disintegrate. And the blessing of belonging to anything is that anything we belong to belongs in us. So when we belong to him, his power and his presence resides in us and indwells in our heart. By God's grace, he does live in our hearts, and the marking, the measuring rod through which we know all this stuff is the Spirit, who is the Spirit of truth. He testifies of the truth, he reminds us of the truth, and he connects us to the truth, and he enables us to know and understand the truth. And these three themes and concepts, obedience, love, and truth, can be likened to a spiraling staircase throughout the book of John. They repeat and rebound throughout. But that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.